competent but also dishonest. And so you were entrusting an incredibly difficult and complicated and subtle operation to a bunch of dishonest buffoons. Now, even if you thought war was a good idea, how in the world could you trust this group of people to pull it off?
Well, again, to take your questions in reverse order, I would make the case at any time to any audience that the Saddam Hussein regime should be removed, and I would give all the reasons that are familiar to you why that is. I'm not going to say, by the way, I don't think this anymore because I don't trust the US government. I mean, I couldn't put myself in that position. Let me put it to you in a way that might strike you as more sympathetic. One of the reasons probably that Mrs. Clinton did not get the Democratic nomination is that on the floor of the Senate, she said that from her own experience of being in the White House when her husband was president, that she could testify that Saddam Hussein was indeed a supporter and armourer of al-Qaeda and similar groups, that he was someone who could never be trusted to have disarmed and so forth. She put her whole reputation on this point, and as you know, with very disastrous consequences for her standing among party rank and file. But it's hard, knowing that that was likely, it's very surprising. Wouldn't it be surprising if she was doing or saying these things insincerely? In either event, she was perfectly right. The Saddam Hussein regime did constitute an enormous threat, and one of the threats you don't mention, or I think sometimes actually from reading you don't understand, is that your idea of Saddam Hussein being contained in his box, as it was called, depends on him being a rational calculator, someone who understands deterrence and self-preservation. There's absolutely no reason to believe any of that at all. Almost all the actions he ever took in his life, from the invasion of Iran to the invasion of Kuwait, to the burning of the oil fields of Kuwait, when he'd withdrawn from them, or as he was doing so, were the actions of a madman. It wasn't possible to say, ever to say, we can have an easy night's sleep with this man in power. Sitting as he does on a choke point of the world economy and refusing, even though it would have saved his regime to do it, to come into compliance with the UN resolutions on weapons of mass destruction, to which he never did come into compliance. Very important fact. It wasn't alleged that he had stockpiles that he was concealing. It was alleged that he couldn't account for the last lot of weapons that he had declared he'd had. Now, you could argue, and I think you do, that it might be just as well to take his word for it. But I could never bring myself to do that.
No, I don't think it's necessary to take his word for it. I think we had
given the benefit of the doubt.
We had a pretty robust system of inspections going on at the time that was ended by the war. And you also had all kinds of evidence that the things that Bush was claiming were not true. And this evidence was subsequently ignored or wished away and so forth. But it's turned out to be proven. And the fact is that before we went to war, the CIA of the United States, not The Nation magazine, not Mother Jones, not the Center for American Progress, said that Saddam Hussein has had no participation in the past 10 years with any terrorist group outside of Iraq. The most recent example they could come up with was the attempted assassination of George H.W. Bush, which has been disputed compellingly, in my view, by Cy Hirsch. But even if you grant them that, it had been at least 10 years, but that an invasion of Iraq would likely inspire such threats. So, according to the CIA, and that yes. Really has to be the only...
When did the CIA ever get anything right? From their belief that the Soviet Union was
Christopher, if what you're saying is Saddam Hussein is irrational, and the CIA is always wrong, then you're just asking us to rely on your gut and George Bush's gut. Okay, you're no longer saying that
from my
this
own
is
knowledge,
irrational.
Eric, I don't have to do an argument from authority, and certainly if I was going to do one, I wouldn't invoke the CIA as an authority on anything. Its track record is abysmal from everything from its belief that the Soviet Union was a big, shiny, stainless steel superpower up till 1989 to its help to the South African government in arresting and imprisoning Nelson Mandela and innumerable other crimes and stupidities. I could tell from my own knowledge that they were wrong about Saddam Hussein and terrorism. I'll give you the most obvious and easy example. Saddam Hussein shifted the policy of Iraq from support for al-Fatah and the PLO, the Arafat leadership, to support for the Hamas and Islamic Jihad forces among the Palestinians, and openly said he would pay from Iraqi coffers money that we know was transferred, 10,000 a time to anyone prepared to commit a suicide bombing, a suicide murder. That's just one example. When the hijackers of the Achille Lauro, led by Abu Abbas, were arrested by the Italians, finally, they had to be let go. You may remember, people said, why are they letting them go? Well, because they're travelling on diplomatic passport, turns out. Oh, really? What diplomatic passport? The Iraqi diplomatic passport. Much more important, maybe more relevant, and much more recent, Abu Musad al-Zarqawi, rival with bin Laden for the leadership of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, appears in Iraq after he's driven out of Afghanistan. Now, I know, if you don't, that no one gets into Iraq. It's a very hard country to get into under Saddam, as well as out of. Nothing happens that the leadership doesn't want. If Abu Musad al-Zarqawi is on Iraqi soil, it's wise to pay attention.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
It's wise
to
pay attention. And he later quite clearly emerged with Ba'ath Party support as the leader of the so-called insurgency in Iraq. And you see absolutely clearly, staring you in the face, shoulder to shoulder, lockstep, al-Qaeda and the Ba'ath Party fighting as one, as a team. What does it take to convince you?
As I recall, you made this point about Zarqawi on Charlie Rose, and I didn't know it at the time, but when Zarqawi was caught, I figured out, I wrote a column in The Nation about this, he was in the part of Iraq that was not under Saddam's control. That's just disingenuous. Saddam had absolutely no control over the part of Iraq that where Zarqawi was.
No, he came in through Kurdistan. He probably came over. It's probable he came.
And he was protected by
those people. It's quite probable that he came through from Afghanistan through Iran, perhaps with the complicity of the mullahs, and perhaps not, but over the border into Iraq that way, where there was a fundamentalist Islamist theocratic terrorist group called Ansar al-Islam, which we have every reason to believe was paid for by the Saddam Hussein regime to assassinate the leadership of the independent Kurdish autonomous zone. It's making the same point in a different way. He later becomes the agreed leader with the Baathists of the attempt to terrorize the Iraqi population and start a civil war between Sunni and Shia to try and undermine the aims of the liberation of the country.
Well, this later point is exactly the point that many people were making. I think I was making it. Certainly Barack Obama was making it in his famous speech, that we've created the very threats that we were alleged to be defending against. Yes, there became an enormous amount of terrorism that originated in Iraq. Yes, there are relations. There was instituted a relationship between al-Qaeda and Iraq. Yes, we now have to worry about the existence of something called al-Qaeda in Iraq, or whatever the hell it's called. But none of these things were the case before we went to war. Hundreds of thousands of people.
Oh, well, then why not just relax? Why not just relax? Because then, if the United States doesn't fight totalitarians and theocrats, they won't exist. There's no problem at all.
No, Christopher,
they're only created by our opposition to them. Relax, take it easy.
No, but the point is that the United States, the business of the United States government is to defend the security of the United States first and foremost. And after that's secure, we can maybe use our military to do some good in the world in, say, Darfur, for instance. You know, in a place where there's no particular threat to us, let's say. Now, the fact is that Iraq was a place much more like Darfur than it was a place like the Soviet Union. They did not constitute any significant threat to the United States of America, and certainly not under the conditions of when we had the more robust inspection regime and military surrounding them. And yet we went in there anyway.
There are four
based on plans that were your friend Paul Wolfowitz and Donald Rumsfeld excluded all of the work that was done by the State Department for the future of Iraq. And in fact, it excluded people on the basis of having done any work on the future of Iraq, and went in and turned the place into a hellhole that we're still recovering from because of their arrogance and incompetence. And